begins in the quiet, not the quiet of a modern bedroom, where distant traffic hums and a neighbor's dog sometimes barks, but a quiet so deep that you can almost feel it pressing against your ears. It is the quiet of the earth itself, the stillness of stone, untouched for centuries, broken only by the slow drip of water far away in the dark. Long before cities, before houses, before wooden roofs and glass windows, our ancestors sought shelter in the oldest homes on earth, the caves. Imagine walking along a cold hillside as the light of day begins to fade. You carry no flashlight, no lantern, only the warm glow of a burning branch held in your hand. The forest behind you rustles with the sound of night creatures, but ahead, in the dark outline of the rock, there is safety. A mouth in the mountain waits for you. A whisper in the stone calls you inside. Step in, and the air changes. Outside, the wind claws at the trees. Inside, the air is still, cool, and smells faintly of damp soil and old stone. Your footsteps echo softly against the uneven floor. You are not the first to walk here. The marks of countless feet are pressed into the earth beneath you, the prints of those who came before, seeking the same thing you seek tonight, a place to rest. The first humans who made these caves their homes did not think of them as quaint or primitive. To them, a cave was more than a shelter. It was a fortress against predators, a barrier against the weather, and a womb of darkness that cradled them as they slept. The walls kept the wind out, the roof could not leak. No wolf could break through stone. But there is something else a cave offers, something harder to explain. Inside, the world feels far away. The vastness of the forest, the endless horizon of plains, the dangers of the open, all of them are replaced by the embrace of a closed space. A small, enclosed darkness where the flicker of your fire is enough to push back the night. In the earliest times, sleep itself was a dangerous luxury. To close your eyes was to make yourself vulnerable, and in the open, the risks were too many. In the cave, the darkness was shared. The tribe slept together, a small circle of bodies wrapped in animal hides, their backs to the wall, their faces turned toward the fire. Even in dreams, there was safety in the nearness of others. The firelight would dance on the walls, painting the stone with trembling shadows. Sometimes, those shadows took on strange shapes, the curve of an animal's horn, the movement of a hunter's spear. These were not just tricks of the light, they became part of the dream world. Perhaps this is where the first stories were born, in the half-sleep moments when the crackling fire and the darkness spoke to the imagination. Listen carefully. In the silence between drips of water, you might hear the faint breathing of those asleep beside you. The cave holds their warmth like a memory. The stone may be cold, but the air here is warmer than the world outside. And as you lie down, your body molds to the uneven earth. There is no soft mattress, only the hard ground, perhaps covered with leaves, grass, or the furs of the last hunt. Yet somehow, this is enough. After a day of walking, foraging, hunting, your body does not ask for comfort, only for rest. As your eyes close, the cave seems to change. Its roof becomes the sky of another world, the dream world. In your mind, the walls are no longer stone but mountains, forests, and endless plains. You dream of the hunt, of the river you crossed, of the faces you saw by the firelight. You dream in sounds, the howl of a distant wolf, the crack of a branch underfoot, the rush of wind through the valley. You dream, perhaps, of the spirits your elders told you about, the ones who live in the deepest chambers, far beyond the reach of your firelight. And while you sleep, the cave remains awake. The stone has been here for thousands of years. It has watched glaciers pass, rivers carve valleys, forests grow and die. To the cave, your night's sleep is nothing, the blink of an eye. Yet for you, it is the world. This stone chamber is your shield, your bed, and your storyteller. It whispers in its own language, in the slow settling of dust, the creak of cooling rock, the distant call of dripping water. Outside, the night deepens. Frost forms on the grass. The stars turn slowly overhead, unseen by those within. Somewhere in the dark, an animal pads past the entrance, pausing to sniff the air. The faint scent of smoke tells it to keep moving. Inside, the fire burns low, casting smaller and smaller shadows. The people dream on, breathing together, woven into the same rhythm. When morning comes, it will not be sudden. Light enters the cave slowly, creeping across the floor in a pale ribbon. One by one, the sleepers will stir, rubbing their eyes, pulling their furs around their shoulders. The fire will be coaxed back to life from its glowing embers, and the smell of smoke will fill the air again. But for now, in this moment, in this night, there is only the cave and its sleeping tribe. The first home. The first bedroom. A whisper in the stone. The fire is not yet fully awake. It smolders in a low bed of embers, glowing like the eyes of some gentle guardian in the heart of the cave. A single curl of smoke rises into the cool air, winding its way toward the mouth of the stone chamber. Outside, the world is still gray with the last shadows of night. Inside, the slow warmth begins to breathe life into the bodies gathered around it. Fire was not always ours. There was a time when humans only knew it as a dangerous force, the lightning-born blaze in the forest, the heat that consumed without mercy. But then came the moment, perhaps countless thousands of years ago, when someone carried a branch of flame into the dark, shielding it from the wind, feeding it carefully, and realizing that it could live with them. That moment changed the way we slept forever. Imagine the first time a cave dweller lay down to rest beside a fire. Before this, the night was ruled by the cold and by predators whose eyes gleamed from the shadows. Sleep was broken and restless, bodies shivering under thin coverings. But with fire came a new kind of night, one that glowed softly in the dark, pushing back the deep blackness beyond the walls. The glow flickered against the stone, painting the walls with shapes that seemed alive. For the children, it was a comfort; for the elders, perhaps a reminder of the mysteries beyond human understanding. In the dance of flames, stories began to take form, tales of the hunt, of the spirits, of the ancestors who first found shelter in these stones. The fire also brought sound to the night. The soft crackle of wood, the occasional pop, the gentle sigh as a log shifted. For the people lying in a circle around it, these sounds became part of the rhythm of sleep, as constant as the slow breathing of their companions. When the wind howled at the entrance, the fire answered with a low, steady roar, promising safety. But fire was more than comfort, it was life. It kept the biting cold at bay during the long winters, when the world outside the cave was frozen and silent. It scared away animals that might wander too close in the dark. It dried damp clothing and bedding, filled the air with the smell of smoke that masked the scent of the sleepers, and allowed them to cook food that was easier to chew, easier to digest. In the heart of the night, someone was always the keeper of the flame. Even in the deepest sleep, one person would stir now and then to feed the embers, adding dry twigs or a piece of bark, watching the orange light grow before lying down again. To let the fire die completely was to invite the cold and the danger back in. In this way, the tribe's nights were woven together by shared responsibility, not just for each other, but for the small son they had captured inside the cave. When you lie down here, the fire becomes part of your dreams. You might dream that you are walking through a field at dusk, the horizon glowing with the same color as the flames. You might dream of a great beast made of light and warmth, curling around you like a guardian. You might dream of the day the fire was found, how the first sparks seemed like magic stolen from the sky. The scent of the fire is its own memory. It clings to your hair, your skin, the furs you sleep on. It seeps into the walls and stays there, so that even when the flames are gone, the cave still carries the trace of its presence. For generations, children would grow up breathing this air, the smell of smoke and stone becoming the scent of home. And in the morning, the fire marks the beginning of the day. The ashes are stirred, the embers coaxed into flame, and over them the first meal is cooked: roots, grains, meat from the last hunt. The smoke curls upward and out into the brightening sky, a signal to the waking world that life stirs within the stone. Yet at night, when the fire is low and the cave is still, it is easy to believe that the glow is more than just light. That it remembers the faces of all those who have slept in its warmth. That it has listened to the whispered words of lovers, the quiet sobs of the grieving, the soft laughter of children who cannot yet sleep. It has been a witness to countless dreams, countless nights, and countless mornings when the world began again. Tonight, as you settle against the earth and pull your furs around your shoulders, you watch the fire and know that it will keep you safe until the sun returns. Its light will guard the edges of your sleep, its warmth will cradle your body, and its quiet voice will tell you stories you will not remember, but which will stay with you all the same. Outside, the first pale line of dawn touches the mountains. The day is coming. But for now, you close your eyes and let the fire's glow guide you into the deep. The ground is hard beneath you. Stone does not give way like grass or soil. It holds its shape, cold and unyielding, as if reminding you that you are sleeping in the bones of the earth itself. At first, it might seem impossible to rest here, but our ancestors learned the art of comfort in a world that offered very little of it. They began with what they had, the skins of animals brought back from the hunt. These hides were more than trophies. They were warmth in winter, shade in summer, and softening against the stone at night. The fur was laid down in thick layers when possible, a cushion for weary bodies after long days of walking, foraging, and working. In the absence of fur, there were leaves, dried grass, and bundles of moss, nature's own bedding, gathered from the forest and spread out carefully. Imagine yourself lying down on such a bed. Beneath the layer of hides, the earth is still there, solid, unmoving. But the fur cradles your bones, the grass shifts softly under your weight, and the smell of the wild lingers in the air. The pelt beneath your head might still carry the scent of the forest, the faint memory of rain, or the musk of the animal it once belonged to. This is not the sterile comfort of a modern bed, it is a closeness to the living world, even in rest. Pillows, as we know them today, did not exist. Instead, a folded hide, a bundle of spare clothing, or a smooth, flat stone served as a headrest. Some might have shaped small piles of grass or reeds, tied together with sinew to form something softer. In colder nights, the headrest would be pulled close to the fire's warmth, or wrapped in fur to keep the chill away. Even the choice of where to lay one's head was a decision, close to the warmth of the flames, or deeper in the shadows where the cool air promised a quieter sleep. Children often slept in small clusters, their heads resting against their parents or older siblings. The human body was perhaps the best pillow of all, warm, steady, and breathing in rhythm with your own. To wake in the night and hear those breaths was to know you were safe. If danger came, it would not come unnoticed. Animal skins carried a deeper meaning, too. The hides were proof of skill, of survival. A hunter's fur-lined bed was not only a place to rest, but also a record of their ability to provide. The patterns of fur, the spotted pelt of a deer, the thick winter coat of a bear, the smooth hide of a goat, told stories of the seasons and the challenges faced. Lying beneath them was like being wrapped in the history of the hunt. The softness of the bedding was matched by the way it held warmth. Once the fire's heat filled the cave, the hides trapped it close to the body, creating pockets of comfort in an otherwise cold space. In winter, this warmth could mean the difference between waking and not waking at all. In summer, the bedding might be thinner, just enough to keep the stone from pressing against bare skin, but still carrying the familiar sense that marked the sleeping space as home. There is a quiet ritual in preparing a bed in a cave. Before nightfall, someone clears away any damp leaves or debris from the floor. The furs are shaken free of dust, the grass bedding fluffed, the smooth stone headrests placed at the proper angle. These small actions, repeated night after night, create a sense of belonging in a place that, without them, would feel like an empty cavern. The bed becomes a personal territory within the shared space of the tribe. Close your eyes here, and you might notice that the cave changes its sound once you are lying down. The echoes soften, the fire's crackle becomes deeper, the breathing of those around you blends into a slow rhythm. The stone pillow under your head is cool at first, but your body's warmth slowly spreads into it. You curl into the fur, pulling it tight around your shoulders, and the weight of the day begins to leave you. There are no clocks to mark the hours, no alarm to break the morning. Sleep comes when the fire burns low and the air turns heavy with night. The bedding holds you in place, and the world outside disappears. Sometimes the wind moans at the mouth of the cave, and in dreams it becomes the call of distant spirits. Sometimes the crackle of the fire turns into the sound of a stream you once crossed. The textures beneath you, the coarse fur, the smooth stone, weave themselves into the fabric of your dreams. When the morning light comes, it falls first on the bedding closest to the cave entrance. The hides catch the glow, their colors warming in the dawn. One by one, the sleepers rise, stretching stiff limbs, shaking out the bedding, folding the furs for the next night. The stone pillows remain where they are, patient, unchanging, waiting for the next time someone will lay their head down and surrender to the ancient rest of the cave. In this way, the nights of our ancestors were built from simple things: stone, fur, grass, warmth, and the steady presence of each other. And though the modern world sleeps on springs and feathers, in soft rooms and warm houses, somewhere deep in the memory of our bodies is the knowledge of this other kind of bed, one that connected us to the earth, one that wrapped us in the wild. The air inside the cave is alive. Not in the way that a forest is alive, filled with birdsong and rustling leaves, but in the slow, steady rhythm of something ancient and patient. It moves in and out as if the mountain itself is breathing, a soft exhale when the wind outside presses in, a faint inhale when the cool night pulls the air back through the stone corridors. If you sit quietly near the entrance, you can feel it on your skin. In winter, the cave exhales a faint warmth, rising from the deep chambers where the air is insulated from the frozen world outside. In summer, the breath is cool, sliding across your face like water in a stream. Our ancestors noticed this long before they understood why. To them, the mountain was not an inanimate mass of rock, it was a living guardian, and its breath was proof that they were safe within its chest. This breathing was more than a comfort, it was a guide. The shift in air told you when a storm was gathering outside, when night was deepening, or when the first light of dawn was drawing near. Hunters sleeping close to the mouth of the cave learned to read these subtle signs. The wind's change in tone could mean prey was moving across the valley. A sudden stillness might mean danger, the quiet step of a predator. The breath carried scent as well. The smoke from the fire curled outward with the exhale, carrying the tribe's presence away into the forest, while the inhale sometimes brought the smell of rain, of pine resin, or of animals passing by the entrance. In this way, the mountain spoke without words, telling its people what was beyond the stone walls. Inside, the movement of air shaped the nights. Sleeping near the mouth of the cave meant you felt the cold more sharply, but it also meant the freshness of the outside world touched your dreams. Sleeping deeper inside meant the air was stiller, heavier with the warmth of bodies and the scent of furs. The tribe balanced these choices, the elders often preferring the deeper warmth, the younger and more watchful taking places closer to the entrance. There was music in this breath, too. When the wind outside rushed through narrow openings in the rock, it hummed softly or whistled, a sound that blended with the crackle of the fire and the occasional drip of water. On certain nights, when the wind was strong, the cave's breath became a song, a low and haunting melody that echoed through the chambers. For children drifting to sleep, it was a lullaby. For the elders, it was the voice of the mountain itself. And just as a sleeping person's breath changes with dreams, so did the mountains. In heavy storms, the exhale was a roar, a powerful push of air that rattled leaves and sent sparks from the fire dancing. In calm nights, it was nothing more than a whisper, the gentlest sigh you could imagine. But always, it was there, constant, steady, ancient. When you lie down to sleep and feel the breath of the mountain on your face, it is impossible not to sense your smallness in the scale of time. This air has passed through these stone passages for thousands of years, long before you came, and it will continue long after you are gone. It has touched the faces of countless generations, cooled their brows, carried the scents of their fires, mingled with the warmth of their sleeping bodies. Sometimes, the breath of the mountain reached into dreams. A sudden cool touch on the cheek might shift the dream into a memory of crossing a cold river. A warm drift might turn the dream toward a summer afternoon spent hunting or gathering berries. The air was not passive, it moved through the mind as much as it moved through the cave. In the deep hours of the night, when the fire burned low and the tribe lay in stillness, the breath became more noticeable. Without the crackle of flames or the murmur of voices, the soft in and out of the air was like a heartbeat. In that moment, it was easy to believe that the mountain truly was alive, that you were resting within something much greater than yourself, something that had watched over people since the beginning. Come morning, the breath shifts again. The first exhale of dawn carries a hint of light, a slight warmth as the sun touches the rock outside. The air feels different, charged with the energy of the day. The sleepers stir, furs are folded, the fire is rekindled. The breath of the mountain does not stop, it changes, flowing into the rhythm of another day, another hunt, another night to come. To sleep with the mountain's breath was to be reminded, each night, that the earth itself was part of your rest. It was not just a shelter, it was a presence, a companion, and a keeper of dreams. Somewhere in the darkness, there is a drop. You hear it before you see anything, the faint, patient plink as water falls from the ceiling and strikes the stone floor. It is a small sound, almost nothing against the silence, yet in the stillness of a cave at night, it becomes enormous. Every few seconds it comes again, echoing faintly through the chambers, each drop ringing like a tiny bell. Our ancestors knew this sound well. It was the voice of the cave itself, speaking in the slow language of water and time. A single drip could have taken hours to form, gathering from the unseen cracks and channels above. It might have traveled through the mountain for days before it finally let go, falling into the pool below. This was a rhythm older than humanity, a heartbeat you could measure not in seconds, but in centuries. At night, when the fire was low and the tribe was quiet, this dripping became part of the dream world. Those who slept close to it swore that it changed as they drifted between waking and sleeping, sometimes faster, sometimes slower, sometimes vanishing altogether before returning again like a familiar friend. In the darkness, the mind made stories out of it, the footsteps of spirits, the tapping of an ancient drum, the gentle fingers of the mountain playing on stone. Water was not just sound. It was life. The pools fed by these drips were precious, clear, cold, and safe to drink. Hunters filled their leather pouches here before long journeys. Mothers washed their children's hands in the shallow edges. The sound of dripping water in the night was a reassurance. The mountain still gave, the spring had not dried, survival was still within reach. For children, the drip was a lullaby. Some elders would tell them that each drop was a dream falling into the world, waiting to be picked up by someone sleeping nearby. If you were very quiet, they said, and if your dreams were ready, one of those drops would find its way into your mind and carry you somewhere new. These were stories, of course, but stories have a way of settling into the heart until they feel like truth. The sound also marked the passing of time in a place where no sun or moon could be seen. A steady drip became a measure. A hunter waiting for dawn might count them until his turn to watch was over. Someone waiting for the storm outside to pass might listen and mark its change as the wind grew calmer. In this way, the water became a clock, one that kept its own slow, patient time. If you lie here now, your head resting on furs, the sound comes to you through the stone. You might not even need to face the pool, the cave carries the echo to every ear. At first, it is sharp and distinct, each drop clearly apart from the last. But as sleep pulls at you, the spaces between them blur. The drip becomes part of the background, like the warmth of the fire or the breath of the mountain. It no longer interrupts your thoughts, it carries them. Sometimes the dripping joined the night's music, the wind at the entrance, the low hum of sleeping voices, the shifting of the fire's coals. Together, they made a kind of natural harmony, a song that had no beginning or end. It was the music of a place that had sheltered life for countless ages, long before names, before writing, before the idea of history itself. By morning, the sound was still there. It did not pause for the waking world, nor did it quicken when the tribe moved about. It was as steady as ever, as if it belonged to a different scale of existence altogether. And in truth, it did. The drip you heard at night was part of a process that would one day create great stone columns, stalactites and stalagmites, over spans of time so vast that no human would live to see them form. To sleep with the sound of dripping water was to be reminded that you were only a moment in something far larger. Your life, your dreams, your nights in the cave. They were like single drops in a vast and endless river of time. The mouth of the cave is neither inside nor outside. It is a threshold, a line between two worlds. Behind it lies the firelight, the warmth, and the slow breathing of sleepers. Beyond it lies the dark forest, the open valley, the sky scattered with stars. To guard this place is to stand with one foot in safety and the other in danger. Our ancestors knew that the cave's safety ended at this mouth. Predators could not break through stone walls, but they could prowl here, just outside the glow of the fire. Wolves, bears, great cats, all might be drawn by the smell of meat, the sound of voices, or simply curiosity. The watchers at the entrance were the tribe's eyes and ears in the dark. These guardians were not always warriors. Sometimes they were elders who could not run far but could still hear the faintest rustle in the night. Sometimes they were the young, eager to prove their strength and courage. Whoever kept watch, they carried the same responsibility. To keep the fire burning, to sound the alarm at the first sign of movement, and to keep their own presence hidden from whatever wandered too close. The mouth of the cave had its own language. The forest wind shifted as it passed, carrying scents of pine, of damp soil, of the musk of animals. The guardians learned to read these scents as clearly as others might read a trail. A faint tang of smoke from a distant fire meant another group of humans nearby. The sharp smell of wet fur meant an animal had passed recently. There was sight, too, though not the kind that came from daylight. Eyes learned to see in shadow, to notice the way starlight caught the curve of a branch, or how a patch of darkness moved against the rest. Sometimes, it was only the flash of two eyes reflecting the faint firelight that gave away a predator. Other times, the forest seemed perfectly still, and yet the guardian knew, by some instinct, that something was watching back. In the quiet hours, the watchers were not entirely alone. The mountain itself seemed to stand with them, the stone arch of the cave mouth looming above like a protective brow. The rock was cool to the touch, but steady, solid. Leaning against it, you could feel the faint vibration of the wind passing outside, or the muffled sound of footsteps inside as someone shifted in their sleep. Some nights passed without event. The fire hissed softly, the stars turned overhead, and the only movement was the slow dance of the smoke curling into the night. Other nights were tense. The far-off howl of wolves might grow closer, the snap of a twig might echo too loudly, or the wind might carry a scent that set the heart racing. On such nights, the guardians kept their spears close, their eyes fixed on the tree-line, waiting for shapes to emerge. There were moments of beauty, too. The moon might rise over the valley, silvering the leaves and painting the world in pale light. Owls might pass overhead, silent shadows against the stars. Fireflies might drift close, blinking like sparks in the air. The guardians knew these sights well, and yet they never let beauty make them careless. For those sleeping inside, the knowledge that someone watched the entrance was as comforting as the warmth of the fire. Even in dreams, there was a part of the mind that rested easier knowing that danger would not come unnoticed. The guardians were the first defense, and, if needed, the first sacrifice. By dawn, the watchers welcomed the pale light spilling into the mouth of the cave. The danger of the night faded, replaced by the sounds of waking life, birds calling, leaves rustling, the soft shuffle of the tribe rising from their beds. The guardians' shift ended with the rising sun, their watchful eyes closing at last as they handed the safety of the day to others. To stand at the mouth of the cave in the deep night was to hold back the wilderness with nothing but your own presence. And though the stone walls protected from behind, it was the living eyes at the threshold that truly kept the sleepers safe. The fire crackles softly, sending up thin threads of smoke that curl and vanish into the higher darkness of the cave. The air smells faintly of charred wood and animal hide, the sense of 100 nights before this one. Around the flames, the others are beginning to grow still, wrapped in their fur blankets, the low murmur of conversation fading into yawns. But here, near the wall, I sit with a piece of charred stick in my hand, tracing a shape only I can see. The wall before me is rough and cool to the touch. It has been here longer than any memory, longer than any name. In its uneven surface, the flickering firelight awakens shapes, long, leaping shadows that seem to dance in time with the flames. I follow them with my eyes, letting my mind wander. Some shadows look like animals we have hunted, the curve of a bison's horn, the long stride of a deer. Others look like the figures of people, ourselves, perhaps, caught in the middle of some great hunt or quiet gathering. I draw slowly, patiently. The lines are crude, yet each one carries meaning. A line for the ground beneath our feet, a curve for the back of the great aurochs, a circle for the sun. My hand moves as though guided by something beyond me, by the stories passed from voice to voice, by the hunts we've survived, by the dreams that come when we sleep in this place. Behind me, the rest of the group shifts and settles, the sound of furs rustling in the dark. A child's small cough echoes, and then silence again. The firelight shivers, and with it, the shadows grow long and strange. Some bend across the wall, stretching into forms that I never intended. But that is their way. The shadows are alive, taking our shapes and changing them into something new. I wonder if these walls remember us. If long after we are gone, these lines will remain, silent witnesses to the nights we spent here. Perhaps someone in a time beyond mine will stand where I am now, tracing their fingers over the same stone, wondering who we were. The shadows deepen as the fire burns lower. I set the charred stick aside and watch the moving shapes without trying to capture them. They are enough on their own, fluid, restless, filled with stories I will never fully know. My eyes grow heavy, but I keep them open a little longer, unwilling to lose sight of this shifting gallery. The others are asleep now, their breathing slow and steady. I hear the wind at the cave's mouth, faint but steady, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and faraway rain. It mixes with the smell of smoke, the warmth of the fire, and the cold breath of the stone walls. I lie back on my bedding of skins, still facing the wall. The shadows dance a little longer, and then begin to fade as the flames shrink to glowing embers. In the dim red light, the drawings seem to fade too, as though they are returning to some hidden place within the stone. The first true winter wind would creep into the cave like an uninvited guest, sly at first, then biting. Out beyond the mouth of the dwelling, snow would drift across the valley in silent sheets, each flake dancing in the pale glow of a cold moon. Inside, the air was dim, thick with the mingled scents of smoke, animal hides, and the faint dampness of stone. These nights were the longest of the year, nights when time seemed to hold its breath. Families huddled together beneath layers of fur, their bodies pressed close, not only for comfort but for survival. The elders would sit nearest to the fire, its light flickering across their weathered faces, casting deep shadows into the creases of their skin. Sparks would occasionally pop from the logs, drifting upward like tiny embers of memory, carrying with them the warmth of 1,000 winters past. The fire was the heart of the winter night. It burned low but steady, fed with wood gathered and dried in the months before. Each log was precious. To waste one was to tempt the cold to claim a place in your bones. Around the fire, life slowed. Conversations were quiet, half-whispered, as though the darkness beyond the cave walls might overhear. Outside, the wind moaned in the narrow rock crevices, and the sound would mingle with the distant howl of wolves. It was not a threatening sound, at least, not to those safe within the stone walls, but rather a reminder that the world beyond was wild and unforgiving. The youngest children would often listen with wide eyes, their minds painting pictures of ghostly animals prowling in the snow. Nights were for rest, but also for stories. The elders would weave tales of ancestors who had survived winters even harsher than this one. These stories weren't just entertainment, they were lessons in resilience. Each carried a warning, a piece of wisdom, or a quiet hope. In the telling, time passed unnoticed, and the deep cold outside became something distant and less fearful. The sleeping arrangements changed in winter. People drew closer to the inner walls, away from the draft of the cave entrance. Thick hides were hung like curtains, forming small enclosures where families could trap their body heat. Sleeping mats of woven reeds or grass, layered with furs, softened the hard stone beneath. Over time, the rhythm of the night became familiar, the crackle of fire, the shifting of bodies under blankets, the occasional cough or sigh in the dark. Some nights, the moonlight would spill across the snow outside and reflect faintly into the cave, casting pale light on the walls. In these moments, the rock seemed alive, the rough textures catching the glow, the painted shapes of animals on the walls flickering with the movement of the fire. To a half-asleep child, it might seem the bison and deer on the walls truly moved, their shadowy forms galloping in and out of the stone. The cold still clung to the stone when the first faint light began to seep into the cave. It was not the blinding light of midday, nor the gentle glow of fire. It was something softer, almost hesitant. The mouth of the dwelling, framed by frost and jagged rock, let in a pale shimmer that slowly crept along the uneven floor. The air shifted with it, carrying the promise of warmth but not yet delivering it. Those who slept in the deeper shadows stirred first, not from noise, but from the subtle change in the rhythm of the dark. Their breathing altered, bodies turning beneath layers of fur and woven reeds. In the deepest corner, an elder's eyes opened, not wide, but just enough to measure the day's return. For them, dawn was not a clock or a number, it was a feeling, a slow tide of light that touched the senses before the eyes could fully see. The children, always quicker to greet the morning, squirmed beneath their coverings. Some whispered to each other in the half-dark, their voices hushed so as not to disturb those still lost in dreams. A hand reached to quiet them, not in anger, but in the wordless agreement that mornings should begin in peace. The hearth at the center, reduced now to glowing embers, was coaxed back to life. Fingers, practiced and sure, fed at dry twigs and shavings, then larger pieces of wood. The flames caught slowly, stretching upward, their flicker joining the first strokes of daylight that painted the far wall. On that wall, the night's shadows still lingered, long, distorted shapes cast by stone, fire, and sleeping bodies. As the sun rose higher, these shadows would shrink and retreat, giving way to new ones. The smell of warm stones mingled with the earthy scent of the cave. A pot, left near the embers overnight, was brought forward. Inside, a thick broth had rested through the night, its surface gathering flavors from herbs and bones. In the quiet ritual of morning, each person received a small portion, hands curling around the bowl for both heat and nourishment. Outside, the frost cracked under the slow stretch of sunlight. Far away, the cries of morning birds echoed against the cliffs, blending with the rustle of leaves touched by the first breeze. Some would leave the safety of the cave soon, hunting, gathering, or simply walking the ridges to watch the day unfold. Others would remain, tending to tools, repairing clothing, and minding the fire. In these moments, between the last breath of night and the first full light of day, there was no rush. The world seemed to move in the same slow rhythm as the people, measured, deliberate, unhurried. Life inside the cave was not ruled by the demands of hours, but by the natural balance between darkness and light. The first light of dawn was more than just the start of a day. It was the gentle reminder that the night had been survived, that the shelter had held, and that the rhythm of life, as it had for countless generations, would continue. The sun had now climbed far enough for its light to pour more boldly into the mouth of the cave. What began as a hesitant glow at dawn had deepened into a soft gold, spilling across the packed earth floor and brushing the rough stone walls. The night's chill still lingered in the deeper recesses, but here, closer to the entrance, the air felt gentler, touched by a warmth that seemed to invite the day forward. The hearth, once only embers, now danced with steady flames. Their orange light mingled with the sunlight, casting shifting patterns on fur coverings and carved wooden bowls. The warmth gathered here was not only from fire or sun, but from the slow waking of the people themselves. Movements became less cautious, voices less hushed. A young woman knelt by the fire, turning flat stones that had been heated earlier. She placed thin strips of meat across them, the sizzle and aroma filling the air. Nearby, a man carved a section of bone, shaping it into a tool while his breath formed faint clouds in the still cool air. Children, no longer content to remain still, edged closer to the entrance to watch the light spread over the valley. Their giggles and soft chatter mingled with the sound of crackling wood. Further back in the cave, where the shadows still held the night's cold, the elder sat wrapped in a thick fur, hands folded in quiet thought. Every so often, their gaze wandered to the opening, measuring the angle of the sun as if reading a story written in light. The warmth was not only physical, it was the rhythm of the morning settling into its shape. Food was passed around, not in haste, but in a pattern that felt as old as the stones. Each portion was offered with a glance, a nod, a small word. The people drew closer to the fire in a loose circle, sharing space and heat. Outside, the frost had begun to retreat from the grass and stones. Drops of melting ice slid down from the edges of the rock face, catching the light like beads of glass before falling to the ground. In the distance, the forest stirred, branches creaking, birds shaking free of sleep, small animals darting through the undergrowth in search of the day's first meal. One of the hunters stepped outside, stretching in the pale sun. Steam rose faintly from his fur-lined shoulders as the cold gave way. He stood for a moment, not yet moving toward the hunt, as if savoring the weight of the warmth on his skin. Within the cave, the conversations grew livelier. Someone told a small joke, and laughter rolled softly against the stone walls. A child offered a carved bead to another, beginning a playful exchange. The smell of the cooked meat reached the furthest corners, drawing everyone nearer. The gathering warmth was more than the joining of sunlight and fire, it was the slow weaving of people into the day. It was the comfort of familiar faces in the soft light, the shared breath in a space carved from rock, and the unspoken knowing that they faced the world together. The morning had ripened, the air carrying a crisp clarity that made each sound sharper and each shadow more defined. The warmth of the cave lingered behind them, but now the hunters and gatherers stepped into the open, boots crunching lightly against the frostbitten earth. Beyond the safety of stone and fire lay the path that wound between hills and into the forest, a route older than memory, worn by countless feet before theirs. The pathway was narrow, just wide enough for two to walk abreast, bordered on one side by the slow rise of a moss-clad slope and on the other by a scattering of leafless shrubs. The winter sun glinted off tiny beads of moisture clinging to the bare branches. Breath curled into the air, vanishing in the stillness. They walked without speaking. Words felt too heavy for this space, as though the path demanded a quiet respect. The only sounds were the soft thud of feet, the occasional snap of twigs, and the distant call of a raven. Each step was measured, not out of fear, but in acknowledgement of the thin line between traveler and trespasser in the wild. Animal tracks marked the way, small deer hooves pressed lightly into the soil, the delicate marks of a hare, the winding trace of a fox. These signs were read silently, each person storing the knowledge away for the hunt or the journey back. As they passed a curve in the path, the forest began to draw nearer, the trees forming a loose arch above. Here, the light softened, filtered through bare branches that trembled slightly in the faint wind. The air smelled faintly of damp bark and cold stone. A child walking near the back paused, crouching to inspect a patch of lichen growing in the shadow of a rock. The elder, who had chosen to walk with them, leaned down and traced a finger along the greenish surface, giving a small nod. No words were exchanged, yet a teaching had been given. Further along, the path widened briefly where an ancient tree had fallen seasons ago, leaving a hollow in the ground. The trunk, now blanketed in moss and fungi, was a reminder of time's steady work, how even the tallest living things would someday rest upon the earth. As they moved forward again, the silence began to shift. Faint sounds emerged from the forest, the trickle of unseen water, the faint rustle of wings, the patter of something small moving through the undergrowth. It was as if the forest, sensing their quiet respect, had begun to acknowledge them in return. The pathway eventually narrowed once more, curving toward a place where the trees grew thicker. Beyond this bend lay the deeper wood, where the day's work would unfold, gathering food, tracking game, and reading the signs of the land. Before crossing that threshold, the group paused. They looked back once toward the distant shape of the cave, its entrance now a small shadow in the slope. Then, without a word, they stepped forward together, their silence carrying them like a thread into the heart of the forest. The forest seemed to swallow them whole as they stepped past the narrowing bend in a path. Light dimmed here, filtered through a latticework of bare branches and the evergreen needles of towering pines. The air was cooler, damp with the scent of moss and the faint tang of old rain. Each breath carried the taste of earth. The grove stretched out like a great hall, its floor carpeted in a thick quilt of fallen leaves and pine needles. Shafts of pale light pierced the canopy, spotlighting patches of green moss and the gnarled roots of ancient trees. Some trunks were so wide it would take 3 people, hand in hand, to encircle them. Here, the sound of the outside world faded to almost nothing. The wind was caught high above in the branches, so the air below remained still, broken only by the occasional creak of shifting wood. The group's footsteps softened to whispers against the damp ground. They passed a cluster of stones stacked carefully at the base of an oak, their surfaces marked with faint carvings. The elder slowed, brushing their hand along one stone's edge, murmuring a few words too low to catch. The younger ones watched closely. This was a place of remembering, a place where the stories of the land lived without needing to be told aloud. Birdsong returned here, cautious at first, then growing bolder as the travelers lingered. A robin darted between branches, and in the distance, the rhythmic tapping of a woodpecker echoed like a slow drumbeat. Near the grove center stood an old tree with a hollow trunk, its heart long gone but its outer walls still alive. Someone had once lined the hollow with smooth stones, forming a shallow basin where rainwater now gathered. A child leaned close to look, seeing their own face ripple in the dark surface. The elder placed a hand on their shoulder, guiding them gently away. Water in sacred places was to be left untouched. They rested in the grove for a time, sitting on the thick roots of an elm. Packs were set down, food shared quietly, dried berries, strips of smoked meat, and water poured from skin pouches. The fire from earlier that morning was a memory now, but here the grove's stillness seemed to carry its own kind of warmth. Before leaving, the group spread out briefly, each person scanning the forest floor. Edible shoots, wintergreen leaves, and dry twigs for kindling were gathered and tied into bundles. Every small taking was balanced by the quiet offering of thanks, sometimes spoken, sometimes just held in the mind. When they rose to leave, the light had shifted, a little brighter now, as if the sun had found a way to press deeper into the forest. The path forward would lead them into denser shadows before they broke into open ground again. They moved on, the grove at their back, its silence following them like a watchful spirit. After leaving the hush of the deep grove behind, the path began to descend gently, guiding the travelers toward the soft murmur of flowing water. The air grew cooler and fresher, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of wet stone and fresh earth. The sun, now climbing higher, filtered through the thinning branches, casting dancing patches of light on the forest floor. Soon, the gentle babble of the river reached their ears, a constant, soothing presence that promised both life and challenge. The river wound through the valley like a silver thread, its surface catching the sunlight in sparkling flashes. Along its banks, smooth stones and fallen logs created natural seats and resting places, perfect for a brief pause in their journey. The group approached quietly, mindful of the fragile balance between them and the river's creatures. The elder knelt first, dipping fingers into the cool, clear water. A small fish darted away, flashing scales briefly in the sun. Nearby, reeds swayed softly in the gentle current, and dragonflies hovered like tiny jewels above the surface. Water was a gift in this world, a source of life, refreshment, and renewal. The travelers drank deeply, cupping their hands and letting the cold liquid chase away the dust and fatigue of the morning. Some splashed their faces, welcoming the sharp chill that seemed to awaken every nerve. Here, the riverbank was both resting place and gathering spot. Small fires were kindled with twigs and dried leaves, and meals were shared once again. The aroma of roasting fish mingled with the fresh scent of the flowing water, creating a feast for the senses. The children waded cautiously into shallow pools, their laughter mingling with the river's song. Smooth stones were gathered and skipped across the surface, sending ripples outward like the echoes of long-ago days. As they rested, stories were told. Tales of great rivers from distant lands, of animals that could swim and dive beneath the waves, of storms that could swell the waters beyond their banks. These were stories of water's power and mystery, passed down in hushed tones beside countless fires. The river's edge was also a place of watchfulness. The current could be swift and treacherous beneath the calm surface. The hunters looked for signs, broken branches, disturbed earth, the tracks of animals coming to drink or cross. They knew that both prey and predator relied on the river, and so the safety of the tribe depended on understanding its moods. When the time came to move on, the group gathered their things and stepped away from the water's edge. The sun had climbed higher, and the warmth of the day was beginning to press in around them. They left behind small offerings, stones placed carefully near the water, a handful of berries tucked into the earth, a quiet thanks for the river's generosity. The path ahead rose gently again, leading them away from the life-giving flow and toward new adventures. As the sun began its slow descent, casting long amber shadows across the valley, the travelers turned their steps back toward the cave that had sheltered them through the night. The warmth of the day softened into a gentle coolness, and the air filled with the faint sense of earth and pine, mingled now with the smoky promise of the hearth waiting within their stone sanctuary. The journey back was quieter than the morning's trek. Feet moved steadily but without haste, each step carrying the weight of fatigue and satisfaction. The hunters carried their catches with care, while the gatherers bore bundles of herbs, berries, and kindling collected along the way. The children, their cheeks flushed from the fresh air, trailed behind, occasionally darting ahead to explore a fallen log or a curious rock. The path that had seemed so vast and unknown in the early light now felt familiar, worn by countless journeys, each step a thread in the fabric of their shared story. The forest seemed to lean in, the rustle of leaves whispering farewells and promises of return. The branches above swayed gently, letting shafts of golden light slip through in fleeting patches. As they approached the cave, the first flickers of smoke rose against the darkening sky. Someone had already rekindled the fire, its glow a beacon welcoming them home. The scent of burning wood and drying furs filled the air, comforting and real. It was a signal that the tribe was whole again, gathered around the life-giving warmth. Inside, the cave's cool stone walls seemed to embrace them, holding the stories of the day like a silent witness. Mats of woven reeds and animal skins awaited, arranged carefully for rest. The elders took their places near the fire, their eyes reflecting the flickering flames. Younger members moved about, tending to tools, preparing simple meals, and sharing quiet laughter that echoed softly in the cavern. The children settled quickly, their energy spent. Some curled up beside their parents, others found a spot near the glowing embers, lulled by the fire's steady heartbeat. The night outside deepened, stars emerging like scattered diamonds across the velvet sky. The cave mouth framed the dark expanse, a threshold between the safety inside and the mysteries beyond. Stories rose once more around the fire, tales of the day's hunt, of animals glimpsed, and signs read in the forest. Each voice carried the rhythm of the tribe, weaving experience and memory into a tapestry that would outlast even the stones themselves. As sleep finally claimed them one by one, the cave held its breath, the fire's glow dimming but never fading. Outside, the night whispered secrets to the wind. Inside, the warmth gathered and grew, a quiet promise that when dawn came again, they would rise together, ready to meet whatever the world would bring. As darkness fully embraced the world beyond the cave's mouth, a hush settled over the sleeping tribe. The flickering fire cast long shadows that stretched across the stone floor, swallowing the faces and forms of those who had drifted into rest. Yet, in the quiet of night, the watchful eyes of the tribe remained alert. There was safety in vigilance, even when bodies lay still and dreams took hold. The night watch was a sacred duty, carried by those chosen to stand between the sleeping and the unseen dangers that prowled the wilderness. Wrapped in heavy furs, they moved softly through the dim cave entrance, their breath visible in the cold air, their eyes sharp and steady. The rhythm of the night was slow but deliberate, measured in the crackle of dying embers and the faint sounds of the forest beyond. Outside, the world was a realm of shadows and whispers. The hoot of an owl, the rustle of leaves stirred by a night breeze, and the distant howl of a lone wolf filled the darkness. These sounds were neither enemy nor friend. They were the language of the night, the constant background against which the watch was kept. The watchers knew the terrain intimately, the shapes of rocks and trees, the paths animals traveled, the hidden hollows where predators might lurk. Their senses were tuned to every movement, every shift in the wind, every scent carried on the cold night air. Even the faintest disturbance could mean the difference between safety and danger. Within the cave, the glow of the fire had shrunk to a soft ember, its warmth lingering but subdued. The watchers paced slowly, hands resting on sharpened spears, their eyes scanning the darkness beyond. Sometimes, they would pause to listen, to catch a subtle sound or movement, their presence a silent shield protecting those who slept. The weight of responsibility was heavy, but it was carried with quiet pride. For the tribe to rest well, the watch had to remain steadfast. The watchers understood that their vigil was a gift, not just to the people they protected, but to the ancestors whose spirits they honored with every breath. As hours passed, the night deepened, and the world seemed to hold its breath. The watchers shared no words, only occasional glances that spoke volumes. Together, they formed an unbroken line of light and shadow, guardians of a fragile peace in a wild and unpredictable world. When the first pale light of dawn finally began to creep over the horizon, the watchers' vigil came to an end. They returned to the warmth of the cave, their bodies tired but their spirits unbroken. The tribe stirred awake, safe and whole, ready to greet the new day. The night watch faded into the morning mist, but its presence remained, a silent promise that while the world slept, there were those who stood watch, steadfast and true. The first fragile tendrils of dawn crept gently through the cave's mouth, weaving pale gold and soft pink into the shadows that had held the night. In this quiet hour, before the world fully stirred, the tribe began to rouse, slowly, carefully, as if waking from a shared dream. The watchers, having fulfilled their solemn duty, retreated into the warmth of the cave's deeper chambers. Their faces, still shadowed by the remnants of night, softened with the relief of rest. But the fire, the fire, was waiting to be born anew. Tending the morning fire was a sacred act, a ritual that spoke of life's continuity and the promise of each new day. The oldest among them would rise first, gathering kindling and dry twigs, their fingers moving with practiced care. The air was crisp and cool, heavy with the scent of earth and lingering smoke from the night before. At the hearth's edge, sparks were coaxed from flint and stone, tiny stars born with gentle strikes. A wisp of dry grass caught the spark, trembling briefly before blossoming into flame. Slowly, carefully, the fire grew, licking at small twigs, spreading warmth and light. The glow chased away the cave's lingering shadows, bathing the walls in a golden embrace. The painted shapes on the stone, those silent storytellers, flickered once more, alive with new meaning in the morning light. As the fire settled into a steady burn, the tribe gathered near, their faces brightening with its warmth. Small hands reached out to warm themselves, voices rose softly in greeting and shared hope for the day ahead. Food was prepared beside the fire, roots and dried meat, softened by gentle heat. The aroma mingled with the crisp morning air, weaving comfort into the quiet hum of awakening life. Bowls were filled, hands passed, and the rhythm of morning meal began. Outside, the world stretched and yawned, shedding the cool cloak of night. Birds sang their first songs, and the breeze carried the fresh scents of dew-wet leaves and pine. The cave, now alive with firelight and human breath, stood as a beacon, a sanctuary of warmth amid the vastness of wilderness. The first fires of morning were more than just flame and smoke, they were a promise kept, a ritual renewed. In their glow, the the tribe found strength, connection, and the courage to face whatever the day would bring. As the morning fire crackled and the tribe settled into the rhythm of the day, another presence stirred beyond the cave, the wind. It was a constant companion, weaving through the trees, carrying whispers from distant places, and singing a song only the earth itself could understand. The wind was more than a simple breeze here. It was a messenger, a storyteller, and a reminder of the vast world beyond the stone walls. It danced through the valley, lifting fallen leaves and stirring the grasses, its voice rising and falling like a haunting melody. To those who listened closely, the wind spoke of coming storms, of the changing seasons, and of far-off lands beyond the horizon. Children would stand at the cave's mouth, faces tilted upward, eyes closed, trying to catch the wind's song. They imagined it carried voices of ancestors long gone, or the laughter of animals hidden in the forest. Sometimes the wind would catch strands of hair or tug at the edges of cloaks, playful and elusive. The elders, wrapped in furs, often paused their work to feel the wind on their skin. To them, it was a living thread connecting all things, the trees, the rivers, the animals, and the people themselves. The wind reminded them that life was a delicate balance of forces, ever moving, ever changing. As the day stretched on, the wind shifted from a gentle hum to a stronger breath. It rustled through the leaves with greater urgency, carrying with it the scent of rain and distant thunder. The tribe read these signs carefully, knowing that the wind's song could signal both blessing and challenge. Songs were sometimes sung in response, simple melodies lifted to meet the wind's call. These songs honored the earth's breath and asked for protection, for plenty, for safe passage through changing times. Around the fire, voices rose in harmony, joining the wind's ancient music. As evening approached, the wind softened once again, settling into a calm that soothed the land. The valley seemed to hold its breath, wrapped in the quiet aftermath of the day's song. In the cave, the tribe listened, to the crackle of fire, to the rustle of furs, and to the lingering melody of the wind outside. It was a song without words but full of meaning, a reminder that even in stillness, the world was alive and singing. High above the valley, where the earth rose sharply against the sky, stood the ridge, a jagged line of rock and sparse trees silhouetted against the fading light. From this vantage point, the watcher surveyed the land like a silent sentinel, eyes tracing every movement, every shift in shadow, with unwavering focus. The watcher's role was both ancient and vital. From the ridge, they could see the approach of herds and predators alike, the slow drift of clouds, and the changing patterns of the wind. Their gaze was trained to catch the faintest trace of danger or opportunity, to send word back to the tribe below. Wrapped in furs that whispered softly in the breeze, the watcher leaned on a spear carved from polished wood, its tip sharp and ready. The air was thin and crisp here, filled with the scent of pine and stone, and the distant murmur of the river winding through the valley floor. Below, the cave entrance appeared as a dark crescent, a small sanctuary carved into the mountainside. From this height, the watcher felt the weight of responsibility, guarding not just the people, but their stories, their lives, their future. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in streaks of amber and rose. Shadows lengthened across the landscape, weaving a tapestry of light and dark. The watcher's eyes never wavered, catching a flicker of movement, a lone deer stepping cautiously along a ridge path, pausing to drink from a hidden spring. With practiced calm, the watcher raised a hand in silent greeting to the distant figures moving near the cave's mouth. The day's gathering was ending, and soon the tribe would settle in for the night, trusting the watcher's vigilant watch. As twilight deepened into night, stars began to prick the darkening sky. The watcher remained, a quiet guardian between earth and sky, between safety and the unknown. The world below slept, but here, on the ridge, the watch continued, steady, unblinking, eternal. Night had deepened into a velvet darkness, punctuated only by the pale glow of stars scattered across the sky like distant fires. The world seemed hushed, wrapped in a blanket of stillness that pressed softly against the cave and the surrounding wilderness. Yet in this silence, there was movement, quiet, careful, deliberate. The silent steps belonged to those who moved unseen through the shadows, hunters returning from their watch, or perhaps creatures of the night, slipping between the trees and rocks. Every footfall was measured, cushioned by layers of moss and fallen leaves, practiced to leave no trace but a whisper on the earth. Inside the cave, the tribe lay in peaceful slumber, their breathing slow and steady. The fire's embers glowed faintly, casting a warm but subdued light that barely touched the rough stone walls. Outside, the cool air wrapped around the entrance, carrying the sense of pine, earth, and distant wood smoke. The silent steps belonged to a lone figure, moving with the grace of a shadow, aware of every sound, every scent, every flicker of moonlight through the trees. Their eyes, sharp and steady, scanned the darkness for signs, tracks in the soil, the broken twig, the faintest ripple of movement. This was the moment when skill and patience met. The silent steps could mean survival or loss, peace or danger. Each careful movement was a thread woven into the fabric of life here, a life balanced on the edge of the known and the unknown. As the figure approached the cave, the fire's faint glow grew stronger, promising warmth and safety. The silent steps slowed, then stopped. A breath was taken, deep and steady, before crossing the threshold back into the circle of light and kinship. Inside, the tribe stirred, faces opening slowly to the returning presence. The silent steps became words, laughter, and shared stories once more, threads binding them tightly against the dark outside. The night wore on, and the fire that had warmed the tribe throughout the day and into evening now dwindled to glowing embers. Their soft red light pulsed gently against the cool stone walls of the cave, like the slow heartbeat of the night itself. Around the hearth, figures curled in furs lay quiet, eyes heavy with sleep, breaths slow and even. These last embers were more than dying flames. They were a symbol, a promise that warmth and life would return with the dawn. Even as the fire faded, its spirit lingered, whispering stories of countless nights spent in this sanctuary carved from earth and stone. Each ember held memory, of laughter and tears, of hunts won and lost, of whispered dreams and sung songs. The air was thick with stillness, broken only by the occasional crackle as a tiny spark sparked briefly to life before fading again. Outside, the wind moved softly through the rocks, carrying the scent of pine and distant rain. The stars shone cold and bright, watching silently over the sleeping tribe. Somewhere deep within the cave, the elder shifted, murmuring words in a tongue older than the stones themselves, a prayer or a blessing, perhaps, carried on the quiet breath of night. Around the embers, the tribe's shared history settled, knitting together past and present with threads of firelight. The last embers glowed, then faded, leaving behind only the soft warmth in the stone and in the hearts of those who had gathered here. The cave was ready to embrace the next day, the next story, the next gathering of souls. As sleep deepened, the promise remained clear. No matter how dark the night, the fire would always return, the last embers giving way to the first flames, lighting the way forward through shadow and time.